In this video, I'm going to be reviewing Canopus. This is Yamamoto's Cosmo Air Light replacement paper. I will be doing a paper test. I will be comparing it to 3 other papers, and I'll tell you what I like and don't like about this paper coming up. So what I want to do in this video is I'm going to talk about 4 papers that I think are in sort of the same category. And that's like these micro-coated, super sheener papers. And the Canopus paper is Yamamoto's newest paper that they developed specifically to be a replacement for Cosmo Air Light. Now, Cosmo Air Light was a very popular paper. I made these paper mined Cosmo Air Light hardcover notebooks. These are all now sold out. I do have the twin ring version still available. And then I've also come out with my replacement notebook, which is the Tranext paper notebook. So I think the big thing here is to just point out the differences. I'm also comparing it to Graphilo, which I consider a similar paper. So let's just start off by talking about the main differences here. Now, when it comes to the paper weight, the Canopus is 73 GSM. I should also say this does come in a notebook. I just wasn't able to get one in time, but it's essentially the exact same build as their Cosmo Air Light notebook. I'll put a link to that up in the description. So very nice soft cover notebook, flexible stitched binding, and it's blank and you get a guide sheet with it. So that's basically the formats that this come in along with the bullet pad here, but I'm sure they'll be doing more in the future. Now, as I was saying, 73 GSM, the Graphilo is 81.4 GSM, and then the Tranext and the Cosmo Air Light, at least the versions that I have here, these are 83 GSM each. So when it comes to the fountain pen performance, all of these are going to hold up to fountain pen ink really, really well. So, you can really dump ink on these. The coatings on these are all quite durable. I wouldn't consider any of them fragile. You can use flex nibs on these. Now, obviously, if you cut the paper with your nib, and there is no paper that's going to hold up to that. But I've been using my flex nibs, with extra fine flex nibs that go to double broad, and I haven't had any issues with really damaging the surface. So all 4 of these papers are super fountain pen friendly. Now, the Canopus is the lightest weight. It's the most textured, and I would say it catches the ink on the paper catches the light the least out of all of these. So, you don't quite have that same pop of color of sheen that you get on these other 3 papers. Now, the Graphilo, again, this is a custom-made writing paper that Graphilo put out. They don't sell this to anyone. You can only get it in loose sheet as well as their like A5 slim notebooks. I have started carrying this loose leaf paper as well as their notebooks at the Paper Mine because I just think it is a really nice paper. This one does sheening better than the Canopus. It has a little bit of a texture to it, so it's definitely smoother than the Canopus, but not by a lot. It has a very nice feeling to it. Now, the Cosmo Air Light, this is a smoother paper. There is some texture to it. There is some sponginess to it that people either love or hate. I think that this feels more luxurious than the other 2 papers to write on, just in terms of like, a smooth feel to it. This shows off shading and sheening more. This catches the light a lot more than the other 2. The Graphilo isn't too far off, but it is a lot more noticeable, I think, with the Canopus. Again, paper performance is basically perfect, really just excellent. The difference in shading or ghosting between these 2 is pretty minimal, even though that this is the lighter weight paper. So I think, performance-wise, very good. This is also the most yellow or off-white paper. You know, Cosmo Air Snow is probably closer to these other three papers. And then here we have the Tranext, which I think in terms of like sheening and catching the light on this paper, these are very, very close. Like the feel of these papers is almost identical. There's maybe a little bit more smoothness to the Tranext over the Cosmo Air, but if I didn't have them next to each other, I would have a hard time telling them apart from the color, whereas the Tranext is more of a bright white and this is an off-white. So in my testing, I do think that the Tranext is really almost a like perfect replacement for Cosmo Air Light. The Canopus and the Graphilo are extremely nice papers. These are papers that I think are less polarizing than the Cosmo Air Light and the Tranext. These feel coated still, but they feel closer to like normal uncoated paper because they have that slightly more of like a natural texture to them. They still don't feel like normal paper, but they're closer in that direction. So that's really my conclusion on here. You know, if we look at this, if I hold this up, you know, if we look at the Oto Fude ball here, right? This really catches the light, the Cosmo Air Light, and the same thing happens here on the Oto Fude ball. You can really see it catch the light. And then if we go onto the Graphilo, it's also doing that same thing. Notice how the blacks look a little bit more dull on this paper for whatever reason. And then if we go to the Canopus, this is the most flat. I'm not saying that it doesn't catch the light, that it doesn't show sheen, because it definitely does, but it's just not as obvious, I think. It's not as, you know, in your face as the Cosmo Air Light and the Tranext. Now let's do some live writing here. I'll use the Canopus bullet here. This is Iroshizuku Shinkai in a Peniter, I don't remember what this thing is called. We'll just see how it does. This is an extra fine nib. This will, I think, cut the paper. When we do this, I really should have done this on a different page. Oh well. Let's do it on the Tranext here. Okay. And then we'll also do that on the Graphilo. Okay. And then we'll do a swab, an ink swab on these just to see how they hold up. And I've got a bubble there. That's just not good. Okay. So. A little bit up top. Then we'll do the Canopus here. A little bit up top. And then we will do the Cosmo Air. Okay. All right, so we'll pause and then we'll come back. All right, so what do we think of the results here? Interestingly, like you get a lot of nice sheen on this Graphilo on the scratching or the the back and forth I did with the piniter. And we also didn't see it really break the surface, which I'm very impressed with this performance. The Canopus, again, this is the most dull of the three. You do see some of that red around there, but you don't see any red in the writing that I did with the piniter there. It looks pretty flat. I also think the color looks the most different on this paper. It looks more, muted, whereas these are more vibrant blue. Now this is the Tranext that we have here, and you can see just all those rings of the red shimmer. Interestingly, compared to the Graphilo, we do see more red in the writing than we see here. I'm not 100% sure why that is. We do get a lot of red sheen, though, in the Waterman Serenity, which you don't see on like normal uncoated papers. So, and if we look at the back, we did break that surface. And then if we go to the Tranext here, we can see it's spotting a little bit where I went back and forth over it a few times. Not as much is coming through as on the Canopus. And then, no issues, of course, with the swatch there. Yeah, it's always interesting to see how these papers behave. Like this has very crisp red outlines, whereas this is more blended into it. Very, very interesting how that works. And then here's the Cosmo Air Light. Again, we don't see it quite as much red in this, the Cosmo Air here. It's very, very, very similar performance to Tranext. These really are so close in the way that they perform. Whereas I think we saw the most red in the Graphilo. And then if we look at the swatch here, again, the performance is very, very similar to the Tranext, where we have, these very clear, bright red outlines, where again, the Graphilo is more red, sort of dispersed out. It's very, paper is so weird. Now we did see spotting. We saw more spotting on the Cosmo Air Light with the nib, and no spotting on any of the ink swatches as you would expect. So that was interesting. I think the in terms of breaking like the surface of the paper here, I would say I would put the Graphilo in first place, the Tranext in second, the Cosmo Air in third, and the Canopus in fourth place, because that really came through the most. Now, this is the thinnest paper. This is the second thinnest paper, so this is a very impressive result. Also notice, if we're looking at these all right now, the Canopus has dried much faster, and that is something that I noticed compared to these other two, or these other three. This does dry the fastest. Now, one thing I do want to take a look at is line spread. They all exhibit line spread. However, I think the Canopus and the Graphilo exhibit the least amount. So let's take a look here. So this is the Canopus, and this is the... And then let's take a look at the... This is the Tranext. And the Graphilo. Okay, so visually, they're all really, really close. I think the Graphilo, the Cosmo Air, and the Tranext have more line spread than the Canopus, but they're very, very close. As another comparison, I know, am I making a mess of this? So many people have already clicked off of this. If you're still here, you're a real paper nerd like me. So let's take a look at this compared to, this is Paper Mind Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM. So let's see. This does not have line spread. Yeah, so, okay. There is certainly line spread compared to the Tomoe River. The Tomoe River doesn't really exhibit much in the way of line spread. So you do have some, but it's less than the other three papers here. So, okay, I think that's all of the things that I want to cover. All three of these papers are excellent. You know, if you're really trying to go after sheen, I don't think the Canopus is really going to be your best choice, but this is a super nice paper, you know, so I definitely wouldn't tell you not to get this. It has more of a texture, you know, the difference between Cosmo Air Light and Tranext, like really it's just the color of the paper. It's more bright white with the Tranext. So if you loved Cosmo Air Light, I really do think that Tranext is the best replacement. However, if you said, you know what, there's too much line spread, I like paper with a bit more texture, a bit more of a natural feel, the Canopus could be a really good option. And of course, the Graphilo, this is a pretty dynamite paper as well. I don't think you can go wrong with any of these, but if you're really just expecting that super sheener performance, I would say I would probably steer you away from Canopus. I would go towards Graphilo and Tranext. I really think they're the best. The Tranext is still not dry yet, which is crazy. So what are my pros and cons for the Canopus paper? Right off the bat, I think we want to be thankful to Yamamoto Paper for actually developing a new paper specifically for us fountain pen users. You know, that's a wow. I know Daryl also at Masubi did that. So, you know, I'm very happy that we have these companies making new papers for us because really the paper industry is shrinking and we're losing stuff like Cosmo Air Light and the original Tomoe River and bank paper and Passivheat cream. So really, I would encourage you guys to support Yamamoto Paper if you can. I have no affiliation to them. I'm, you know, a competitor to them, but I really like that they're doing this. So kudos to them for that. Now, the real pros here. It's very fountain pen friendly. It's more bright white than Cosmo Air Light was. It dries faster. It has a more natural feeling texture to it. It still feels like a coated paper. There's no getting around that plastic coating, but it does have a more natural feel than the other three papers that I compared it with. And it holds up to fountain pen ink really nicely, even flex nibs, you know, as long as you're careful not to, you know, really damage the surface, you'll have no issues with bleeding and feathering. It does ghost, but so did Cosmo Air Light. I don't really think there's too much of a big difference between them in that performance. Now, in terms of cons, the biggest con is it does not sheen or shade as well as Cosmo Air Light, as well as Tranext, our Papermind replacement for Cosmo Air Light, or Graphilo paper. So it does have a bit more of a dull look. You know, if we compare the samples here with Tranext and the Canopus here, you know, we can see a pretty big difference. So in that sense, if you're really after that sheening, I do think that the Tranext, Graphilo, and Cosmo Air Light are noticeably better than that, like by a good margin. The other con is, well, I think this paper is pretty much sold out right now. It comes in this bullet sort of tester pad here, as well as Yamamoto's, you know, high quality stitched notebook. The notebooks only come in blank. You do get a guide sheet, but if you want ruled and dot grid, you're probably not going to find it in Yamamoto paper. I don't think they ever did that with their Cosmo Air Light, so I kind of doubt they're going to do it with this, but we'll see. But that's pretty much it. It's a really nice paper. I'm happy that we have this new, very fountain pen friendly paper on the market. I don't think it's exactly a replacement for Cosmo Air Light, but it's a nice new paper to have, in the arsenal, something that feels different from Cosmo Air Light and different from a typical uncoated paper. So that's pretty much it. Do you guys have Canopus paper? Have you tried it? Let me know in the comment section below. Love to hear what you guys think. If you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more fountain pen paper and ink videos, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much, and until next time.